The city of Shoreline is facing major budget problems as short-term deficits soon turn into big deficits. To understand the city's proposal, we bring in Sherlock Holmes, not for his ability to solve mysteries, but for something a little more fun. One novel not written by Doyle, but by filmmaker Nicholas Meyer, was The 7% Solution. In this case, we need a second Sherlock Holmes, because the city is proposing what amounts to a 14% solution. Let's look at 4 scenarios that the city is putting forward. Scenario 1 is a 1% tax increase. Under Scenario 2, taxes would rise in line with inflation. The city's preferred scenario means a much higher tax rate, and Scenario 4 is the top legal tax rate. Here are the increases from the base 1% rate. As you can see, the city's preferred scenario means a nearly 14% tax hike, over and above the 1% base rate hike. But it gets better. The city actually claims that this is only a 1.5% tax hike. So how can they call a 14% tax hike a 1.5% tax hike? Well, it's 14% of the city portion of the tax bill. If nothing else goes up, then the total increase will be 1.5%. In other words, they're lumping in a whole bunch of other taxes and assuming that none of them will rise. This is bad math. How did this mess happen? A quick look at city taxes versus the rest of our property tax bill shows that city taxes jumped 6 years ago while the rest of our taxes did not, and yet we're in a fiscal bind. Taking a look at city finances, we see that since 2006 there is a major problem. Inflation rose by just under 30%, tax revenues, because of the jump, rose almost 52%, but spending rose by almost 60%, more than twice the inflation rate. Going forward, the problem just gets worse. Spending is projected to continue outpacing not only inflation, but also revenues, and this situation is not sustainable. But even if the city believes that we need this 14% increase, the voters just won't accept it. In this election year, there are good reasons why Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are doing so well. There is tremendous anger at the status quo and a growing perception of corruption at all levels of government. In addition, we've been here before with that massive tax increase just 6 years ago. If the city insists on asking for a 14% tax increase and it fails, then we're stuck at 1% for the foreseeable future. We're going to have to reduce future spending. But what can we cut? The problem is that the budget is not only extremely complex, it is also extremely obscure. Most budget items require a lot of research to understand fully. Understanding the budget requires a lot more time than this committee has available. My strong recommendation, which requires a little out-of-the-box thinking, is that we continue with inflation-based increases. If we do that, then the current projection is for 2 years of surpluses, followed by 2 years of somewhat smaller deficits. In year 5 we get into trouble, but if we enact only a 4-year plan instead of a 6-year plan, then at the end of that 4-year period, the city will have a net gain of over $500,000, without any other changes. This plan gives us 4 years to begin to fix things. One area in desperate need of change is improving the business climate. For many years, the city has been hostile to business, particularly offices. This may be because office construction doesn't bring in a lot of money directly, but executive and professional offices do generate a variety of higher-end retail, which not only brings in lots of money, but could also enable us to finally build those walkable communities like they have in Lexington, Virginia, Frederick, Maryland, and right next door in Edmonds. We can also begin to cut future cost increases. The most obvious places to start are where costs are projected to rise the fastest, such as with health insurance, jails, landscaping, and road maintenance. If we take affirmative steps over the next 4 years, we can close the budget gap significantly, leaving us in much better shape to plan ahead. How can we get the budget under control? By getting people involved. If each of us recruited just a couple of people, and if we split into groups of 3 or 4 people each, with each group tackling just one small portion of the budget, there's no limit to what we can accomplish. I leave you with a famous quote from Margaret Mead. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Now let's get to work.